Hi, I'm Kemp, and this is my final project for dual credit art. I picked Artemisia Gentileschi as my subject. I included the moon background on this slide because her name is Artemisia, and that made me think of the goddess Artemis from Greek mythology, who is often associated with the moon. Anyways, enough of the detour. This presentation is about Artemisia Gentileschi, her achievements, evolution, and why her work has survived the test of time. Part 1. Biography. Who is Artemisia Gentileschi? Artemisia Gentileschi was born July 8, 1593, and died in 1656. She began painting professionally at the age of 15 during the Italian Baroque period. She was the first woman to become a member of the Accademia di Arte del Disegno in Florence. She received clients from all over the world, and most of her work features women of mythology, allegories, and the Bible. Her subjects were victims, suicides, warriors, and more, most notably Judith. She initially began painting in the style of Caravaggio, inspired by her father Orazio Gentileschi, but grew into her own while still meshing nicely with other work of the time period. Gentileschi's call to long-term notoriety was her ability to depict the female form with graceful naturalism and her usage of color to express both dimension and drama. However, her work as an artist was overshadowed during her life by the spreading story of a man named Agostino Tassi raping her when she was a young woman and the trial against him that she actively participated in. It's practically unheard of for a woman of her time to stand up against and call out a man as fiercely as she did, which proved she was a brave and progressive character. Artemisia Gentileschi was a fascinating woman on her own, but her work is possibly even more awe-inspiring. In this presentation, we'll dive into her greatest achievements, artistic evolution, and decide why her art has survived the test of time. And to the right is Self-Portrait as the Allegory of Painting, which she finished in 1639. I'll touch on this one later. Part 2. Achievements. What are her greatest artistic achievements? Gentileschi was skilled at utilizing dramatic lighting, facial expressions, mannerisms, symbolism, small details, and color to portray a message and story while also pleasing the audience's eye. But in what pieces did she accomplish this the best? What works by this criteria can be considered her greatest achievements? Lucretia, Artemisia Gentileschi, 1620, shown to the left. Rather than appearing like a hopeless victim, Lucretia shows a strong resolve and sense of bravery, both in her fierce expression and the gripping of her breast in one hand and the blade in the other. The background is pitch black, so she stands out in the foreground, and the intense glow of her skin with the slipping white fabric emphasizes her face and grip, so the focus is on her and her thoughts rather than the actual action or tragedy of suicide. The crimson fabric draped over her leg foreshadows the coming deed, but the focus is on the psychological aspects rather than purely emotional or physical, which is why the dagger in her hand is also very dark. I didn't even notice it at first. This piece is an achievement not only for its symbolism and beauty, but also for the unique characterization of Lucretia. She's not just a victim, but a person with real depth, whose death was not a tragedy, but a planned decision to send a message and free herself from the torments of men. She is portrayed as someone to look up to, not down on. You're not supposed to pity her, as it's an action of regaining power and control of her own destiny and body after being violated. Susanna and the Elders, Artemisia Gentileschi, 1610. This piece is believed to be one of her first, at least one of the first that was discovered. Susanna and the Elders is a common scriptural scene portrayed by artists, but 17-year-old Gentileschi brought it into a brand new light with her interpretation. Susanna is clearly aware of the intruders and is showing obvious discomfort and suffering. She's being harassed, while in other interpretations she's typically unaware of the men or even flirting with them. Susanna is aglow with a white cloth draped over her thigh, implying her innocence in this situation, as white is often associated with purity, while the men are bathed in dark colors and backed by storm clouds, foreshadowing their negative intentions and evil character. One of the men is shushing her, showing that he knows what he's doing is wrong and wishes not to be caught. The man who is shushing her is also wearing red, which is often a sign of danger. Susanna's intense expression and physical display of distress create the effect of a fleshed-out heroine to root for. The center of the work is Susanna's suffering, and the men are perceived from her perspective, something particularly unusual for the time period and entirely revolutionary. Through Susanna, Gentileschi provides a new perspective for the men around her to consider, as they're clearly the antagonists of the piece. It's a message of feminism and a show of respect and understanding of female victims, even before Gentileschi herself became one. Judith slaying Holofernes, Artemisia Gentileschi, 1613. Judith slaying Holofernes, similar to Gentileschi's other pieces, focuses on the humanization of a female subject, but this one takes it a step further. Judith exudes bravery and strength, but the difference from other paintings on the subject is the maid's participation in the act, and the brutal, detailed portrayal of the killing. This rendition poses a question: what if women banded together? If we could slay a vicious man, what else could we accomplish? Gentileschi utilizes Judith to portray a message of feminism, a subtle call to action that women do not have to be pushed around, and men are not invincible. Judith and the maid are not portrayed as heroes, but powerful women completing a horrifying task. This piece is an achievement not only for its eerie, moody lighting, Holofernes' unsettling expression of distress, or the upsetting beauty of the work, but instead the preciseness and accuracy in sending her message and telling the story visually. Even if you're unfamiliar with the story, there's no questioning what's occurring, and Holofernes' face is still haunting whether or not you know his name. Also, Judith and the maid's expressions are somewhat terrifying, as they both seem entirely calm and even a little disgusted while completing the act of killing Holofernes. Self-Portrait as the Allegory of Painting, Artemisia Gentileschi, 1639, aka the piece that was on my beginning slide. The first thing I noticed about this piece was its simple beauty. Earthy tones, a delicate face, intricate folds, and elegant shading make it exceedingly pleasing to the eye, which is why I picked this piece. It's the first I discovered by Gentileschi and will come up pretty far up whenever you search Artemisia Gentileschi on Google, and it immediately drew me into her work, although her themes are what kept me interested. But like all of Gentileschi's works, this piece specifically also contains an intentional theme, though it's somewhat different from the others. The Allegory of Painting is described as a beautiful woman with messy, dark hair, thoughtful brows, a gagging cloth around the mouth, and a golden necklace from which hangs a visor, which a visor in terms of a necklace is typically a representation of a human face or head. In this case, Gentileschi used a human skull. And the Allegory of Painting is a common metaphor in the art world to just represent painting, or the act of it. This represents the lack of a gagging cloth represents her refusal to be quiet and her adamancy in speaking up, as the cloth's message is that art is quiet. She would not be silenced and would continue to create with her own purpose, no matter what the people around her said or wanted. Part 3, Evolution. How did her work evolve over the years? While Artemisia Gentileschi began painting in a style similar to fellow artist Caravaggio, and likely learned her skill in color, expression, and shading from him, over the years she grew into a style of her own by improving upon these skills. Susanna and the Elders, as shown previously, and Aurora, which you'll see soon, by Gentileschi both portray the feminine form, mostly nude, but Aurora displays a greater knowledge of the human body and its workings, as it's far more detailed and defined, especially in the torso and arms, and her pose is the most dramatic and interesting yet, while still being fluid and anatomically accurate. Aurora also contains Gentileschi's best usage of intense lighting and shading, from the golden cloth over her body to the darkened clouds to the blowing tree in the background, all creating a sense of distress as she seems lost in a storm. Aurora seems to be a turning point in Gentileschi's work because afterwards, even in more average portraits and paintings, her usage of color continues to improve and grow more dramatic and eye-catching, such as the bright blue sheets in Sleeping Venus, also pictured later. She also becomes better at using more simplistic, earthy tones to please the eye as well, and blending them all together, such as, again, in a self-portrait as the allegory of painting, and Minerva, which is pictured later. As Gentileschi grows more adept at detail, lighting, and color, her subjects also seem to soften. Their expressions and the light of their skin are less harsh, for example, comparing Danae, pictured soon, to Minerva, also pictured soon. Gentileschi was always skilled at her craft, but the years bring nothing but improvements as her work becomes more recognizable and emotional, to the point where even simple portraits, such as Minerva, are eye-catching and admirable. Susanna and the Elders is to the right, and Aurora is to the right, and Susanna and the Elders is to the left. The colors of Aurora are more pleasing to the eye, while still remaining intense, and her form is far more defined while still being soft and feminine. The color of Aurora's skin and shading of her body is far more natural and realistic than Susanna's. Both are scenes of distress, but Aurora standing out amidst the dark clouds, her fleeting clothing blowing around her, makes the scene feel far more dangerous, like she could be swept away at any moment. Now Aurora is to the left this time, and Sleeping Venus to the right. Both pieces have bright colors that accentuate the focus, which Gentileschi likely learned her technique for accomplishing this fluidly in Sleeping Venus from her creation of Aurora. Both pieces also show a massive improvement in the texture of cloth and fabrics from her early works, especially if you look at the cloth on Aurora and the sheets beneath Venus. Gentileschi returns to an overshining body in Sleeping Venus, but against the bright cloth it was likely necessary, and also makes sense given that Venus is the goddess of beauty in Roman mythology, and Venus's body is still more accurate and natural than early pieces such as Danae. And Danae is to the left, and Minerva is to the right. I know that's a low quality picture, but that was the best I could get of Minerva. So Minerva also has pale, beautiful skin like Danae and is in somewhat harsh light, but is shaded warmly and gently to better blend with her clothing and surroundings, yet is still the primary focus of the piece, with bright light only highlighting the most important portions to hold your eye, such as her chest, her throat, and her face to keep your eyes up. Part 4. Survival. Why has her work survived the test of time? Artemisia Gentileschi was not only a spectacular artist and not only notable for being a female painter, while it is an incredible achievement for her time to be so well known while also being a woman in art, especially during a time in which art was perceived as a very intelligent craft and women were often not perceived as intelligent. Her work has not survived the test of time simply for its visuals, but for her messages and her skill in sending them. Her themes of female empowerment, survivor solidarity, and averting the patriarchy are the real reason for her continued relevance. She understood the struggles of women better than anyone, both as a victim and a worker in a male-dominated field, during a time in which women weren't supposed to be working at all if not in the home, as a mother and a housewife. Her art is beautiful undeniably, and she was highly skilled in accurately telling the stories of her subject better than most of her male counterparts, but in the end it's her progressive mind and unfaltering character that have kept her work alive and prominent. My illustrious lordship, I'll show you what a woman can do. Artemisia Gentileschi, July 8th, 1593 through 1656. My work cited for each painting. Artemisia was a fascinating woman. I truthfully thought this project would be somewhat boring, but when I saw a woman's name on the list, and I was immediately intrigued. And when I looked her up, I actually found that all of her art was exactly up my alley. It was beautiful. And then finding out that she was raped, and yet she was raped by a fellow artist, someone she knew, and she still continued to work in art, and she would not allow herself to be silenced, despite the loads of criticism she probably received, she kept going strong and she kept with her message and she kept with her work. And that is just absolutely inspiring. And I aspire to be like her. Thank you for watching. Bye.